Okay.
Great. Thanks very much. And thanks to everybody for coming. I know the weather is terrible and there are all kinds of complications, as we've already suggested, that don't necessarily involve travel to the event. So the people who could be here on what's by all accounts a snowy day in Oswego, I appreciate that you've been able to come. This is a session about responding to student writing. The writing fellows and I had a couple of requests to talk about that issue generally. So what we'd like to do is start with some kind of basic ideas. We call this sort of, here's what I do. We wanted to give people just a basic sense kind of how we respond to our own students' writing, and then sort of open discussion for questions or issues or whatever. Before we do, I wonder if we could go around and just quickly do introductions. Maybe the fellows can begin. I'll say I'm Michael Murphy. I'm the Writing Across the Curriculum coordinator here. I also supervise the teaching of English 102 in the English department, which makes me the college writing program director there. And I've been here since I was a graduate student in the early 90s, and have been Writing Across Curriculum coordinator since I think 2006. So anyway, Ken and Stephanie and Amanda, if you guys maybe want to introduce yourselves, and then we could go around the group.
I'll go first. Hi, guys. My name is Amanda Traynham. I teach English 102 almost exclusively, and I'm also a writing fellow. I've been doing it now. This is my third year going on, and I work primarily or most often with the School of Business.
Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? I have my headphones in. Yeah, okay. My name is Stephanie Pritchard. I coordinate the Writing Fellows program, and I teach in the English and Creative Writing department. Also, I teach composition, but also creative writing classes.
And I'm Kenneth Nichols. I'm a writing fellow for Schema, and I teach primarily English 102, but I also teach playwriting.
Okay, great. I am just, I believe, going to send out, yes, I emailed the people who had signed up in advance. I emailed a set of slides to them. I'm going to put them up now, and you can have them kind of as a reference. I just put them in the chat too. So let me share screen. And again, I can kind of begin with some of those basic ideas about response to student writing. And then we can kind of open to a more general discussion. The first thing I want to do is just remind folks, actually, I don't know how many departments still have this hard copy floating around anywhere. I know that my own does not, because I've tried to find it recently, but probably, John, you could remind me. I'm going to guess 15 years ago, maybe now, maybe it's not that long, but some time ago, the college bought for every department a copy of what I think is a really good sort of general primer on using writing in college courses called Engaging Ideas by John Bean, who's people maybe will remember Barbara Walford was here to run a bunch of assessment workshops when we started to really sort of engage assessment. She's a scholar in Writing Across the Curriculum, as is John Bean, and she worked a good deal, did some writing with John Bean. She recommended that we purchase this book and give it to departments, and I think it's been a useful reference. You will be able to find first some chapters on responding to student writing, chapters 14 to 16, the last three, I think. Also, you'll be able to find this book in Penfield Library. At this, you can log it out electronically. I've just discovered that we can actually put this on the Writing Across the Curriculum website. At least I believe we can. And so I'm going to, it's a really good general reference. And in fact, it's from they don't say it's directly from, but I will say that most of what I'm going to recommend here at the beginning is good general practice ideas, sort of tried and true principles of sort of responsive student writing. You can probably find in the Bean book, especially in that last chapter 16, which is about endnotes and marginal notes, the kind of the real sort of response. The other pieces are about rubrics, and I've forgotten what chapter. Oh, it's about sort of pre-response in some ways, generating good writing, which I think he wants to argue makes it easier to sort of respond to students. But anyway, the issues I'd like to raise here at the beginning, just general sorts of practices that I think people in writing studies recognize sort of across the board as good principles in response to student writers are, first of all, being positive and supportive. I probably don't need to recommend that to or make that clear to anybody here, though I will note that when I first got this job as writing across the curriculum coordinator, I went to a conference with a faculty member who's now since left, and I won't name this person, but he was showing me the slides that he gave to his students every semester, which, he was trying to suggest to me that he was really interested in the importance of writing. The very first slide was, "Accept that you are a terrible writer." They just that you should accept that you have lots to learn, and that and I worried aloud for him about the way that might affect students, and I think we can communicate that relatively easily in the responses that we give. They're simply sort of corrective and in no way sort of appreciative of the intellectual act that they've done by putting together the paper. What's really good about it? Then again, I think that we can send a really strongly discouraging kind of message. Similarly, or in a connected way, I think it's important to think about response sort of like conversationally, as briefly as possible, as quickly as I can. I want to say to the student, here's what seems really strong about this paper. Here are the ways that I think you could build on it and make it better. It ought to, I think a good, especially end comment, ought to kind of encourage some kind of response and maybe even look forward to some potential revision. Not like this is over, it's submitted and it's done, but like this is some kind of ongoing piece that, again, you might improve, if not in the to resubmit, but then in further work. Also, I think specificity really matters. To say this is poorly organized, which I think is good. I think it's not as good as, again, as briefly as you can, saying something like, I'm not sure how your discussion in the first paragraph is connected to what you get at in paragraph 3, or especially adjacent discussions. This moment of transition, I'm not sure kind of what the connection between these pieces is. I think that's a place we could articulate a better, we could make a stronger kind of move, and we'd sort of build from individual discussions to make some larger kind of comment. I'd also recommend using both end comments and marginal in-process comments. I think people forget about that lots of times, but it's really, really powerful. First of all, to hear your ideas restated. I will say that my dissertation director never did anything so valuable as say back to me better than I could what it was I was trying to say. That was really sort of formative. It gave me a lot to kind of think about. So simply to do that, it's like, I hear you here saying this, right? Or especially, I lose you here at this moment in your discussion. I'm not sure how this is connected. I'm not sure why it comes up. I'm confused by what you mean even. Again, I think those kinds of in-process comments are really powerful. I would also, and I will say this as somebody, folks who know me know that I am no big advocate of rubrics. I think that rubrics can often be used to kind of deaden, minimize response, just sort of check off the boxes, fill in the blanks. And yet on the other hand, I think they can be really sort of useful depending, especially on like task and genre. That is this a lab report? So that its features are relatively fixed. Have you had some kind of discussion in class that will feed into the distinctions that you make in your rubric in ways that the students will recognize? I think that as well as, of course, how much do you have to grade and how quickly does it have to be done? That too is a compelling argument for a rubric. But so again, you might well consider a rubric. Again, chapter 15 in that Beam book is about rubrics, or 14, I'm sorry. Also, one really important and kind of basic principle, be conscious of how much students are able to hear, especially about grammar stuff. If you go and mark everything that needs to be changed, right? And even if you name it, that's sometimes a lot for students to digest. You might pick 2 or 3 or 4 really important things, right? Both in terms of mechanics, if you want to do that, as well as in sort of larger terms to kind of communicate to students. Seventh, use the Writing Center. They're really good. They're peer tutors. And I think sometimes some students respond better to certain tutors than others. But I think we have a really good, well-established, well-run Writing Center. And I think that's a powerful mechanism for having students work on their writing. Also, consider, if not commenting on drafts, which is sometimes a prohibitive amount of work, I do that only selectively in my own courses, some form of like pre-response more often, much more often than reading either drafts or even proposals. I will ask students to sit down with me before they write. Come with some kind of proposal or prospectus. Tell me what it is that you think you want to write about and why. I think you can head off sort of bigger, higher order kinds of issues at the beginning. Get students really on track in a way that actually does. Advocates of writing across the curriculum often say that reading drafts is a good way to minimize the time that you spend ultimately sort of commenting. I'm not sure that's true. I think that reading drafts adds to the sort of ultimate, you still have to read the final version, even if your comment can be shorter. But I do think that some kind of a conversation with students before they write can be a way to accomplish that. Also consider, and we'll talk about maybe a couple of ways to do this, different kinds of labor-saving tech, markup functions, of course, also like dictation features. I think Amanda's experimented with recording comments, video recording comments. Again, consider those things. One other thing I'll say quickly, two other things actually, quickly before I show you briefly a comment of my own. I get this question a lot about grammar and mechanics in writing across curriculum courses. How much attention should I spend in my intro economics course? I have this huge, in some ways, course, it's hard to do that. The greater the number of students, the more difficult it is to talk about grammar. And I think some faculty are more comfortable doing that than other people. If you want to, this is the way that I feel. If you want to do that, I think that's a wonderful sort of a service to offer students. But I also think that writing across the curriculum faculty should not feel obligated to offer that sort of level of comment. I don't mean just forget about it and let your students off. Make them responsible for their language, but also send them, especially to the Writing Center. Point out, if you can, point out a couple of things that you think are particular problems, complete sentences or comma splices, or the inability, I don't know, to use certain kind of disciplinary language. In some ways, I suppose that's more in the wheelhouse of a writing across curriculum response than a Writing Center one. But in any case, you can point them, you can alert them to some things and then point them in the direction of the Writing Center, or in fact, if there are students who you have you think are having particular sorts of issues, to one of us, to the Writing Fellows. We can, at least as time permits, selectively work with students, and we're more than happy to do that. And that's kind of my last slide here. I just wanted to say, let the Writing Fellows help. The Writing Fellows can attend classes to deliver short, sort of targeted lessons. We can do it 15 minutes. We can come talk about comma splices, parallel constructions, or whatever, as well as larger practices. If you want us to lead some kind of exercise or describe what it might mean to play around with the structure of sentences, right? Combine and decombine and recombine sentences, and how that might grow students' abilities to write complex sentences. If you feel like that's an issue, we can do that. We can talk about reading for genre conventions, right? What's it, just 15 minutes? What's it mean to read this lab report and look for its basic kinds of structures, right? We won't necessarily be experts in lab reports, but we are really able to talk about how to look for conventions and how they present. We can also coordinate or facilitate peer workshops, either inside or outside of class. And we, again, on a limited basis, we can work directly with writers that you think have particular kinds of challenges. So, okay, I guess I could, is there any thoughts or questions about any of that sort of general introduction? Should we, oops, I'm so sorry.
I have I just, I put a question in the chat, but how do you guys feel about the use of a plugin like Grammarly, right? Where they plug it into their laptop and it kind of catches some of the grammar, the verb, subject agreement, things like that.
I tried Grammarly myself. I won't answer for the group, but I tried Grammarly myself and I was not unduly impressed. I did somehow I flagged a lot of stuff that I thought was not right. It didn't seem very, I think it's good. I think all of like the grammar checks, I'm surprised they don't work better than they do, honestly. But I think the grammar checks are a good sort of analytical device, a good kind of reminder. Here, take a look at this sentence. But I've had a lot of students I've had some students anyway, who say, Grammarly told me to do this, and it ends up being the wrong choice. That's my experience. So I'll say in a qualified way, I think it's a good thing, but it's not it hasn't been for me at least sort of the total answer. Other people?
Michael, I have a question. Since you said we can invite writing fellows to our classrooms, what is the procedure for that? Is there an online scheduling tool, or I can just email for that?
Just email us. Email
Okay.
any one of us.
Okay.
We're sharing duties for liberal arts and sciences these days. Amanda is the School of Business Fellow, and Ken is the liberal arts or the Schema Fellow. And then we lost a fellow for liberal arts and sciences, so we're all kind of sharing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And anybody want to talk about Grammarly?
I do. In addition to the comment that I left in the chat, I like Grammarly if it's helping the students learn some of the basics and fundamentals. But as Mike points out, it's really not a cure-all, and I worry that, especially now that we're going through the pandemic stuff for the past 2 years, the students have a little bit less agency with putting in the effort to care to want to write their own good sentences. And so I don't like the idea that sometimes they'll fall into the trap of just clicking accept, and they're not looking at the error that was flagged or making sure it's right. And not only that, in Google Docs and in Word, I have so many students who don't obey the squigglies. I tell them obey the squigglies most of the time. The computer's trying to tell you that disease is not spelled like that. It's trying to help you. So it's a matter of sheer effort or
Right.
agency or care in that respect.
I mean, I think I started recommending Glamry because I did get frustrated I don't think students, I thought it was a default, but I think students don't have turned on a lot of the auto spell check, grammar check features in Word. I mean, a lot of them are using Google Docs too now. So I think a lot more students are typing there in Google Docs than they are in Word. But I've noticed they're not using, you catch a lot of things that would be, is captured in some of the autocorrect, just like capitalization. And I think, the idea that text speak actually starts filtering into essays, right? So they're not capitalizing the first words of sentences or things like that. Some obvious typos that, that Word or whatever easily catches. So I actually, I'd recommended it when we were doing the final writing project. I do think, I guess in economics, I know I have two other economists here in the room and but I think I actually assigned some pretty structured writing assignments. And so, which is why I think Grammarly really captures that low hanging fruit, because I mean, in some sense, I guess I might say, maybe it's not the best word, but they're probably not as creative as other writing assignments that might exist in other disciplines. There's actually an end purpose here, and this is what you do, and these are the elements, kind of the required elements of this assignment, which is also why I think rubrics work pretty well in my class because of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Something to add to what Liz, you said, because I teach a capstone project, which is HTV 400 course. Something that actually helps with Grammarly is the premium plan. I don't know if you require students to buy a premium plan. So all my courses are free, not required, but I recommend, actually, I shouldn't say require. I recommend a premium plan, and that really takes care of good stuff. All the, it makes the manuscript look kind of like, at least I can read it. It also helps with their resume, personal statement. It comes in handy with their emails as well. So I kind of like that part about Grammarly, especially with seniors.
I will say that the first thing that I have the students write at the beginning of the 102 class is just a reflection on what their high school experiences were like, in terms of reading and writing. to try to get my own baseline. And I have many students tell me that they've never had a teacher go through their prose line by line and explain, no, that's a comma splice. No, you have to capitalize new and York. They've never had a teacher do that. And so that's why, well, yes, I like the Grammarly. I really wish students would come to us, to the instructor, but also to the writing center and just sit there for an hour and have, a smart tutor go through line by line and point out, no, that's not how you use a semicolon, or this sentence doesn't make any sense, or whatever they want to say. Because it is about going back to the basics and just trying to figure out how to construct sentences that are parsable.
Yeah, you're stealing my thunder in part, Ken, because no, that's good. In part, I was going to say, just in terms of response to students' responses to our comments, I don't know. Honestly, I think that I always have mixed experiences. And I don't mean bad experiences, I mean mixed experiences in terms of what my students absorb about my comments. I will say that since I've started to grade on screen. For a long time, I resisted that. I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I started to grade on screen. They could actually read my comments. And so that made some big kind of difference. But even now, some will read and take them seriously, and there will be at least some number who do not. But the number who read, I'm always struck by how impressed they are that you actually read their paper. If they see evidence that you got the idea of what it was they were talking about, and you articulated some response, and yes, Ken, that you paid some attention to detail. I agree. I think students are really appreciative of that.
I actually wanted to ask about the grading on screen. So only with the pandemic, I started collecting homework in Blackboard and putting my comments also in Blackboard. I was just wondering, do the students actually read those comments? Is it easy for them to do that? I usually use the little sticky note where you highlight something and then you put a little note. Sometimes I put comments in like in the side window where like you're commenting on the whole thing. So I was actually wondering what experience, if people find this is working well, or if it's better to just print it out and write the feedback on the paper with the red pen.
Maybe I can answer that. If it's okay, we could begin to answer the general. I know it wasn't just for me, but the general question by I could just reference. I could show you what I do, and we could maybe begin that piece. Because Magdalena, I will tell you honestly, I always hated Blackboard's markup feature, and I never used it. I am not among those who will mourn the loss of Blackboard. Not only for that, I thought it was difficult to maneuver a little bit, to negotiate your way around. But I use Google Classroom, and I really do like the kind of markup feature, in part because it works. I think it works really well. Let me show you the one student who responded and said I could use her. I could share her piece here. Because I think this does, my experience, Magdalena, is that students do read more, certainly better than they did when I was writing longhand on paper. And I think this works because it's really seamless, because when I return a paper to a student, if I can pull this back, when I return a paper to a student, they'll get a notification, and I think the paper either presents in their email or they get a direct link. And they can see either the comment that I write in this box, or if I want to dictate my comment, as I did with this student, they'll see it at the bottom. So, and I've experimented with dictating. You can get an add-on for Google Chrome that will allow you to dictate anywhere, and so I could put it in that box. I hate add-ons. They kind of make me nervous somehow. So you can go here and hit tools and voice typing. And so you can add a comment as I've been doing with some frequency kind of at the end. Again, I find that this facilitates, students will read both the end comment, and here you can tell, I was going to try to speak to the principals. I suggested I was trying to kind of be supportive. and push her to think about, especially about the connections between things. Essentially, this was a paper about the practice of free writing, which we did in class, that is to write, and not stop trying to find an idea or develop an idea, expand it in some way. She was trying to write about the connections between that practice and kind of, I think, via journaling, sort of life connections, the ability to make changes in your life. And so she talked about a little bit about mental illness, about emotional moments and in one's life. And anyway, I worried at the end here that she hadn't fully articulated what the connection was. You know what I mean? It was clear that she'd made some discussions, but I was kind of encouraging here at the end. I was observing that this seemed to me a little free written in some way, which maybe was appropriate given the topic, but that it could be improved and that her other writing could be improved, especially if she then took a step back and editorially tried to kind of address the connections between discussions. She, again, I think that comment here, although I think I edited this a little bit to make it doesn't present perfectly when you voice type. It does pretty well. Sometimes I just leave it as it is. That sort of along with the marginal comments. I wonder if there should be some connection here. Again, I think they're more readable kind of for student writers. Again, that's the way that I have been responding, generally speaking, lately to students. So I don't know, do we want to, I know I think I took too long to describing those kind of general principles. Ken and Amanda and Stephanie, should we go through and do you guys want to describe kind of what you're doing these days? And then we could come back to this issue maybe of.
Sure. I can go first if everybody doesn't mind, just in case my daughter gets over the Little Mermaid or something while I'm trying to talk. So I do a lot of the things that Mike already described as far as leaving comments, like within an essay and things of that nature. But a couple of things that I've started doing is encouraging, like building in revision opportunities. So we started talking about drafting a little while ago. One of the things that I have my class do is they have to submit a draft that is at least 75% complete. They don't know when they submit it, but really when they turn the draft in, I really just grade it on whether or not they turned it in on time and if it is in fact 75% complete. They think they're turning in a draft that's going to get graded like a regular thing. So they tend to put in quite a bit more effort into like what they submit. I go through and mark it up and leave comments all throughout it, like Mike was just showing, I like to do it in Google Docs. I find it very easy that way. But one of the things that I like to do after I leave the comments on the whole thing is attach a checklist to the end of it, which sort of breaks down the assignment and what I'm looking for and gives point values to all of the different parts of the essay that I want them to do. So I'll show you an example of what the checklist looks like. I call it a checklist and not a rubric because it really is that, right? It's meant to kind of be like an additional thing for them to use to help them as they revise. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we use this checklist in other ways too. So here is a link. And hopefully everybody can open it. Can everybody see that okay? Okay, perfect. So basically it just sort of goes through, and the paper that they submit needs to be written in MLA style, and I think it's pretty important for them to learn how to write in a style, right? Whether it's MLA or APA or what have you, but because it's an English class, we use MLA. So I do grade them a little bit on like if they did the MLA style stuff right. So there's some content things here, but also, just some formatting stuff also that's really important. And each item on the checklist has a point value. And I also have like kind of little bullets underneath each section to kind of help guide them a little bit, you know, as they move through and start to work to revise their essay. We use this in a couple of different ways. They see it from me when I give them their draft back. And when I return their draft, I say, okay, if I were to grade this like for real right now, it would get a whatever, you know, like a C or something, you know, and then I would explain, and they could see, you know, the point values that they got on the checklist too, plus my comments and whatever. So I'll say, you know, at this point, it would get a C, but you know, you're going to revise this and submit the final, you know what I mean? So if you do the things that I've notated here, you should see your grade improve, you know? So that's one of the ways we use it. I also have them exchange papers with a peer and use the checklist to grade their peers' paper. So a lot of the times, like sometimes if you do like in-class workshops or ask students to give each other feedback, sometimes they don't really know what to do, right? And they end up focusing on those sentence level things, you know, and like whether or not, you know, the first word of every sentence is capitalized or not. They don't know how to make bigger comments. So I give them all the checklist and ask them to apply it to their peers' paper to grade each section on the checklist and then give their paper like a grade at this point and what they think about it. And I ask them to explain their reasoning for why they gave each section on the checklist the grade that they did, right? So if you gave somebody 3 points out of 5 for you know, a title of their paper, like why did you do that, right? Like tell them why you only gave them that number. And that seems to be pretty helpful for them also, because then they can not only see what one of their peers is doing, but they also kind of get the opportunity to then reflect on what they're doing, right? And like kind of where they stand against this other person. And then they get a checklist from me as well as comments and the checklist from one of their peers. And the idea is that they take all of that stuff and use it to revise their essay and turn in the final thing. And then they see the checklist again when I submit like their final essay back, right? Like when I give it back to them. And at that point, I just, you know, put the point values next to the different things and leave like a big, like an end comment. And that's all the feedback that they get for the final thing. But it's turned into like a nice, you know, for a bigger paper, you know, that has revision, you know, they get graded for the draft, they get graded for the final essay. That way it helps them understand that, you know, there's a learning curve here, right? And that not all their eggs are in the one basket with the one essay, right? And they get feedback from me and from a classmate. So it's worked out pretty well. You know, so that's one of the things that I've been doing that kind of combines the written comments in the thing as well as like a rubric-esque thing. But that's one of the things that I do. Yeah, Karen.
That checklist that you provided, do you do that electronically or do you do that on paper?
I do it electronically, especially like within the last couple of years, you know. What I tend to do is I'll make a Google folder with like all the checklists for, well, like a separate checklist for everybody. And then, you know, every checklist has its own unique link. And then I'll take the link and I'll copy and paste the link right into the Google document. So that they can have access to their own thing, and it tends to work pretty well. You could also copy and paste it like at the end of their essay if you wanted, but I found the links to be pretty easy, so that's what I tend to do.
Great, thanks, Stephanie.
I guess I'll talk. I hate sounding like I only care about the basic boring mechanics of sentences. But over the past several years, I've noted that the prose itself, just on a basic level, is degrading somewhat, and I want them to be able to compose great sentences by the time they get to the upper level classes. So I've been doing my perfect sequence of things. So the first assignment, they have to write just 3 perfect sentences about some subject from before 1990, like when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And the earth had no atmosphere. So just 3 perfect sentences, but I find that at least 80% of the time, each of the 3 sentences has errors. And so I'm trying to get them to slow down and just focus on composing sentences that make sense. And then the next assignment is paragraphs, and then trying to make 3 claims about their subject, 3 interesting, engaging claims, and making the sentences perfect at that. So I've been slowing down a lot on that and trying to nudge the students to either talk to me or to go to the writing center to figure out, the things that I noted in Google Classroom, the mistakes. But then I do a lot of that in class too. I'll have a volunteer. Can I look at your paragraph? And we'll explain why this was wrong, why that was wrong, why the introduction wasn't compelling or could be more compelling. So it's a lot of it is I guess teacher focused and takes a lot of class time, but that's why we try to do that earlier in 102 as to hopefully get them writing better by the time they get to a capstone.
Great. Thanks, Ken. Amanda, do you want to?
And that leaves me for last. So I do very similar approaches to most of my colleagues, slightly different though. For example, I don't use rubrics almost ever. I try to take a very individualized approach to each student because every student has kind of a different thing that they struggle with, I find most often, but I do use a lot of peer reviewing, just like Stephanie was talking about in class. How I set up my assignment is that they'll have one big research assignment that's due at the end of the semester. And we break up the paper into small chunks throughout the course of the semester and focus on different aspects of writing. Meanwhile, they're slowly revising the paper as we go along. And then we focus, or we do, the revisions are very, very specific. For example, we'll have 1 week where we're discussing concision and cohesion in sentences. So when they revise, they're only looking at concision. That's it. They're not looking at anything else. So we target, I do focus on grammar, and don't get me wrong, we do sentence structure activities and stuff like that when it comes to sentences. But I more look at a lot of like the more of the larger ordered things. Like I said, passive and active voice construction, creating complex sentence structures. And so they'll have to go through and fix everything. And then once I say, okay, we're done with the cohesion, they'll use the same one they've revised last week. And now we'll talk about our new thing, which let's say it's complex sentence structures. And now they'll look at the same paper and they'll work on how to create complex sentence structures. So it's just a lot of revision of the same text. When it comes to how I physically grade papers, I'll just be the first one to say it. It's a very arduous and tedious process, as we all know, when it comes to grading student writing. So I've tried to, I guess, change the way that I present it. I do a lot of obviously commenting like my colleagues are talking about, but I've started to do video commenting. So how I do it is I will pull their paper up on Zoom. I will share my screen, and I will talk my way through their paper as opposed to comment my way through their paper. I don't do it for every student, and it's not like the ones I like versus the ones I don't like. I feel that you can kind of get a feel of what students really appreciate, or some students prefer the written on paper and some students prefer the explained more than the written. And so I kind of vary it up depending. Also, when I look at the paper, the first paper that I give them is very heavily commented on. I won't lie and say I don't. But as we work towards that end piece, it gets progressively less commented on from me and more. I use highlights and say, for example, we talked about cohesion. This is like a cohesion issue, and it's more geared for them to like fix the error more than it is. I don't do almost any line editing where they can just click accept, accept, accept. It's all me saying, we talked about cohesion. This is a cohesive error. This is a sentence structure error. But it does start, and it progressively gets, by the time their research paper is in, it's almost no comments on it at all, just more an end comment or me explaining in the video as I produce it.
Yeah, especially with earlier drafts, especially if it's something that we've just taught, like an issue we've just talked about in class or something, I'll just leave question marks because I don't like the accept, 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 accept.
Yeah.
So I'll just leave question marks, and I'll point out like you have at least 10 errors in your first 5-sentence paragraph. Like think about this, but also I also consider going through the papers as as we all do, a journey. Like they are explaining something that they cared about to me, and so when I comment, I try to show them the journey that I'm going on in the way that Amanda does on video. Like, oh, this point is interesting. I wonder where you're going with this. Oh, that's a great point, but I think this is stronger. Whatever that you would say to a person if you were just sharing thoughts verbally.
Yeah, or sometimes even they'll have 2 sentences at the beginning of their paper or the beginning of their paragraph that just blah. But then the third one's like a great
That drives me
topic
nuts.
sentence.
I love that.
You highlight it and you
Yeah.
go, this is the topic. This is like so just more, I think it sometimes come across better when you are recording it because it does sound like a conversation, but I don't think it's not any less time consuming. It's just, I guess it takes away the typing fatigue sometimes we get when we have 60 essays to grade in front of our face.
And I'll add, oh, sorry, Mike.
No, that's good. Go ahead, Stephanie.
I'll add briefly just about, like students reading our comments and, understanding them and whatnot. I tell my students that if they go through after I return a paper, right, any assignment, whether it's a big one or something smaller, I don't do it for like the reflective or really informal stuff, right? But for any of the other bigger writing assignments, if they go through and reply to some of my comments that I've left for them, I give them some extra points back on their paper. Because it shows me, well, even though, they can choose to revise it if they want to and submit it for a better grade. But, like if they go through and like respond to my comments and explain things or say things or ask questions or answer my questions, which is a big one, I'll give them a number of points back on the assignment just for doing that, because it shows me that they've opened up the document, read what I've had to say, thought about it, and replied. So, and that's something I just started doing this past semester, and I've gotten good responses from my students about that, because it's a way for them to get some points back. So it's rewarding. But it's also nice because it helps encourage that typing as like a conversation between me and them.
Yeah. Well, I know Stephanie does this as well. I do interactive journaling with my students, which is essentially a shared Google document, and it's not graded for any grammatical anything. And it essentially serves like sometimes a student will say, is this a good thesis? How's my intro looking? And it serves as like the secondary or sidebarred kind of way to interact with their writing, and a way for them to kind of mediate maybe more complex or difficult to understand texts in their own verbiage or words, more so than just the traditional academic words that we are so familiar with, which helps them, I think, understand the material much better, those low risk writing assignments, more so than just a bunch of high risk like essays or all lab reports or something like that.
Yeah, or go ahead.
No, that's all right. I was going to open for discussion, but go ahead.
Oh, just real quick, I guess. I think what we're all saying is that especially in 102, we emphasize the process. And when a student does get like argue with me, not argue, when a student does, well, I did it because of that, and that's why that's why I structured it in this way. Like, I love that, even if I disagree and it's the writing isn't as good, they're still thinking, and that's 80% of the battle. So even if I disagree with what they're thinking, I'm perfectly fine with that, because we're having a dialogue about because writing is just making a billion choices all in a row. So if we're arguing about those choices, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I was going to say, before I open for discussion, I was going to say just quickly 3 important points, and now 4 maybe that you guys have made that we could emphasize. First of all, like you're saying, Ken, it's really wonderful, right, when students maintain some sense of authorial control.
Yeah, I can't get mad. Yeah.
Yep. I think that's a great thing when students can take agency kind of as the writer and make decisions on the basis of what you've done. That's a great thing. Also, Amanda, you were talking about at one point, at least, about just like a common practice. Not everybody does, but lots of times people read just a certain portion of a paper and comment closely, especially with respect to mechanical stuff, right? So this, fragment, right, that I've seen 3 times in the opening paragraph, right? You're going to do that again later in the paper. So now I've identified it for you. This is something you should work on. Stephanie, rather, you were talking about distinguishing between genres of text, like formal and informal. That has a lot to do, I think, with an appropriate kind of response. What you expect about the language of a formal paper, right, and what might be done with this really different from some kind of informal piece. And then also, Ken, I think it was you were talking about narrating your response, or I guess both Ken and Amanda put me in mind of an important way in which that's been phrased. The writing theorist Peter Elbow talked about, he said that when you responded to other writers' work, what you should do is play movies of what happened in your mind as you read the piece. And so that for him, the most useful thing to do was simply sort of narrate as much as you could the sort of inner workings of your head, kind of as you responded. But so anyway, I'm just wanted to sort of go back and note those what seemed to be important comments. We only got about 5 minutes left, but I know there was a question on the table about responding on screen versus responding longhand. I don't know if we want to take that up, or are there other questions?
I can say one thing about responding longhand on papers. I find that sometimes a Google Comments, like if you were writing on it longhand, you could just put a comma in where a comma goes. But if you're doing a Google Doc, you have to select it, you have to put the comment in, you have to add comma, you got to click. So I've tried doing it a couple different ways, and I found that doing it on my iPad with my Apple Pencil, I have fairly legible handwriting. Sometimes if I'm not in a hurry and not falling asleep. So I found that that's able to combine the longhand comment with the electronic document, and that has worked on some things.
I'll say maybe we're just using different devices, but I can add commas, or just I can edit the student's work in Google Docs. But I don't, because then I don't want them to click accept. So I will make the comment, add comma or something like that.
And the other thing too about if you use suggesting mode and add stuff in Google Docs, commas are really easy. Even though there's a little balloon that corrects, it says you should have put the comma in here. They're really easy for students to overlook. When you actually take the pencil and make a mark, they see it. You're right.
Or you circle it. That's why you circle it. Or with the caret, you do the caret above it.
Other general issues? We've gone much longer describing what we've been doing than I intended. I was hoping there'd be more time for discussion, but other things we want to take up here? Questions or?
I would just chime in. I don't know, no one mentioned it, but my preferred editing is to go into Word. And even if they send me a PDF, I open it in Word and I just use track changes, because that also allows you to just add the commas, add the comments and things like that. Anyone who switches to that, you have to be very clear with students that they have to go into the document, turn the tracking on, accept the changes, consider the comments, then remove them, right? Otherwise you're going to get papers back with it all there, right? So they don't always know how that works. So I have a set paragraph that I use when I email back an edited paper. But I guess time-wise, for convenience for me, it's been actually the easiest, because I think it does combine the paper electronic comment the way that others have mentioned, and gives them a lot of detailed comments to work on as well. And I would just say along that effect, if they're having a grammar or kind of editing or capitalization issue that's throughout the whole paper, I'll usually just do 1 or 2 paragraphs really intensively. And then I said, the rest of the paper is like this, right? This is what you need to work on for the other 3 pages of this paper or whatever. I don't edit the entire paper.
I will say you do it differently, I guess, but I try to get the students to work on digital copies of where I left my comments. That way they have to replicate the old fashioned procedure of starting a new document or retyping it or rewriting it. So if they're putting the comma in, they have to go and put the comma into the copy. And that way they're also doing more cognitive work to actually improve the prose and to strengthen the ideas in the argument.
We need to send them screenshots.
I've thought about that, just making them all PDFs, but then that adds 20 more steps.
Yes, so that's what I was going to say, Liz. That's a point well taken about Microsoft Word, because that's what I used to do. And actually, I've gone to Google Classroom in part out of laziness, because it's really simple. Suggesting mode is already on when I get there, and it gets returned. Not only, I meant to point this out, Magdalena, not only does it get returned automatically, my grade gets filed automatically, which I find saves me a huge amount of time. gets filed and properly computed. And, you know, if you keep your grades on Google Classroom, it'll work like that. But you're right that it is really nice to if they get a Microsoft Word piece and they're not sure how to simply insert changes. So.
Do not put us like far over time. I'm so sorry. I meant to say this while I was explaining. What I also have my students do is I make them keep their own writing rules. It's like a digital Google document. So every single assignment we do, let's say one student has a trouble with comma splices, another student has a trouble with passive voice. They can keep a list of their own individual mistakes that they make so that they have their own personalized checklist so that they can check it against every writing assignment they do. I don't have an example, and if I can, I will reach out to students if they're so willing to send it to me, and I can send it to John and ask him to distribute if possible. It just gives them more, again, because not every student has the same issues, which is why I don't spend too long doing like a whole comma splice lecture, just because not every student has that same problem.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know we're past time.
That's okay. That's a really great. That's something I don't do, and I always mean to. I'm never seem to. That's one of the logistical things, because a lot of this is kind of logistics, having your ducks in a row, and you know, for when students are writing at the right moment, and that part I always neglect. But that's a really great practice, I think. All right. It doesn't look like anybody has any other pressing quick question, because we are out of time or over time. I don't want to hold people. Okay, the other thing I was going to say is please email me or, you know, let me know. We could, if you want to hang out at the end, if there's anything else that writing across the curriculum or the fellows can do, you know, to help as you work with your students writing. If there are other sessions that we should hold, you know, it's a pretty well attended session today. If there are other things, other aspects of, you know, preparing assignments or thinking through citation or international language of international students or whatever, if there are topics that we should take up as a group, or again, other things that we can do, please let me know. Also, I'll just mention, 5 or 6 years, you know, probably more like 7 or 8 years ago now, I used to run a bi-weekly informal talking writing thing in CEL, and then some other things happened where it seemed a little less necessary to do that, but I'm getting the sense lately that it might be good. I think I'm going to start to do that. Okay, I will hold just sort of weekly or probably bi-weekly meetings, and if people want to show and talk through some issue in their students' writing, we can do that. Okay, so look for that announcement. We may start really early with some discussion about the possibility of changing the college handbook. We now use rules for writers. We've talked about some other kinds of possibilities. So anyway, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. And again, I will hang out here at the end. Yes, questions or thoughts?
Thank you.
Good luck with the snow.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, John.